Welcome to another edition of the All Cardinals podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go to comment, like, subscribe on this video, hit the notification bell to get all of our latest videos, updates, podcasts, player reviews, all of that great stuff. For Richie Bradshaw, I am Donnie Druin. Thank you so much again, Richie. I was just telling somebody who did not live in the great state of Arizona last week that it never rains here. The last time we recorded since then, it's probably rained 3 or 4 times. Rainy days around Arizona. It feels like rainy days around the Arizona Cardinals. Not a lot of movement happening in free agency. Still a lot of rumors surrounding wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. Before we dive into all of that, how are you?
I'm good. I'm tired because it's rainy outside, and that just brings the whole mood down in a very good way. We don't get depressed around here when it rains. We get very happy when it rains around here. I'm just ready for a nap. But I mean, how can I not talk about football? I mean, you call me up, you're like, you want to do a podcast? I'm like, yeah, say less, fam. That's just how it goes.
Also, really quick, shout out to the ASU Sun Devils, man. Represented great in the NCAA tournament, which the run was going a little bit longer than it did, but I still feel like they showed out better than some schools in the state of Arizona as well.
Yeah, Donnie, at least Arizona State doesn't pretend they're a basketball school. So
I love it so much. The rivalry will always continue. We're definitely pro Forks Up here on this podcast. And we're definitely pro whatever the Arizona Cardinals feel like is going to be the best for them entering a rebuild. A lot of smoke around our man, DeAndre Hopkins. Good as gone is what I thought would be a very fitting title for this. There's been a lot of smoke since the season first ended about him potentially being traded. Both him and the front office basically confirmed that they had a sit down together. They're apparently fielding calls for him. The Dallas Cowboys were one of the teams interested in DeAndre Hopkins, but apparently they are now out on him after acquiring Brandon Cooks. The New England Patriots are apparently the team to beat right now in the DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes. I'll start first with a really simple question. We can kind of go from there. DeAndre Hopkins is gone, right? Like, there's no use in wanting him back on the roster for 2023.
I don't think there is. I think that right now the Cardinals need to be gathering assets, whatever they can get. DeAndre Hopkins is an aging player. He's still a very good player, but he's aging. He's been injured the last 2 years. He's going to cost a lot of money, and he's up for a new contract in a couple of years anyways. So you need to get whatever you can right now. The unfortunate thing is, are you going to get a second-round pick? No, probably not. I would be very surprised. I feel like this is probably a couple of day 3 picks and maybe not even 2023 picks. These might be future picks. But whatever it ends up being, you just need to stock the cupboard right now because the Cardinals need as many darts to throw at the board as they can in order to get this roster back on track. DeAndre Hopkins has been a great player. He's a future Hall of Fame player. I wouldn't call his time in Arizona a failure by any means, but, unfortunately, things just kind of soured, not between him and the organization, but they soured in the hopes of contending while he was here. So,
I don't feel like calling it a waste is the right way to put it, like you said. I feel like he came here. Yeah, I feel like he came here. He did a lot of great things for the organization. He was a very big part of that 7-0 run the team had. He's a very big reason why they made it to the postseason that year as well. And, dude, even after the suspension, he came back, and it looked like he's still one of the best receivers in football. But he will be turning 31 next year. He's due $19.45 million in cash for 2023. His cap hit is second only behind Tyreek Hill as far as wide receivers go. If you're a Cardinals football team and you're looking to rebuild, having him on the roster just doesn't make sense. And kind of on the flip side of that, if you're DeAndre Hopkins, you're at the point where you want to start competing. You really want to start playing for a Super Bowl year in, year out. And that's just not going to happen in Arizona the next couple of years. But I think he's done a really good job of not feeding into the rumor mill very, very much. He wanted the Pat McAfee show and said he stays out of all that stuff. He pays attention to, I guess, some of the things that you and I and all of our other media members write about him as well. But he doesn't necessarily feed into it, kind of does what he does. But it certainly feels like his time in Arizona will be coming to an end. And I think it's probably best for both sides.
I do too. Again, it's not fair to call this a failure of an experiment that he was here. He was very good when he was on the field. The last 2 years, he wasn't on the field very much. And you're now with a brand new regime, both from a head coach standpoint, but also from a general manager standpoint. And they're going to want to bring in their guys and build their team. And again, you're older, you cost a lot of money, you're often injured, and you can get assets. This is a very easy decision. Like, I understand that there's going to be some Cardinal fans who would rather keep DeAndre Hopkins than trade him for a 5th and a future 6th, but that just might be the case, unfortunately.
You see, I'm really glad you brought that up because that's what Brandon Cooks just went to Dallas for, a future 5th and a future 6th round pick. I think the return on Hopkins is better than that. How much? I'm not sure, and I think that's kind of where the gray area is at right now because you have apparently, according to Albert Breer, they're looking for a 2nd round pick and something else of value. You look at the Brandon Cooks trade. Jalen Ramsey went for a 3rd round pick and basically a backup tight end.
Yep.
I just don't feel like you're going to get a 2nd round pick for Hopkins. Now, maybe you wait until the NFL draft and like there's a team who feels like they're one receiver away from competing and you get them in a 2nd round and you work something out. Sure. But if you're doing this deal before the 2023 NFL draft, I just feel like you're going to have to settle for a day 3 pick.
It's just part of the problem of making these moves during the offseason because I've seen people want to compare apples and oranges. And we talk about, well, if Mohamed Sanu can go for a 2nd round pick, well, Mohamed Sanu was traded mid-season for a team that was competing for the playoffs. This is closer to why Jalen Ramsey was only traded for a 3rd and why Amari Cooper was traded for a 5th is because these are players that teams are trying to actively get rid of for cap solutions and for future issues to kick the can down the road, so to speak, stuff like that. This falls into that category, not the Mohamed Sanu getting traded for a 2nd round pick. This is not the same. Like, yes, DeAndre Hopkins is far and away a more talented player than Mohamed Sanu is. Nobody is questioning that. But these are not even remotely the same kind of situations. And we can also fairly say that Mohamed Sanu going for a 2nd was always stupid. So I don't like people bringing that up either. Like, come on. That never should have happened.
No, I completely agree. And to your point, too, we're in the offseason now. There's still the probability of going to find a receiver on the open market who just got released. You can still add talent through the 2023 NFL draft. I mean, those 2 options still exist, dude. If you're in the middle of the season and you feel like you need to pull the trigger on a trade, I mean, your options are kind of limited. And I feel like that's where some GMs are able to take advantage of other teams in that aspect. But I guess if you're the Cardinals, is there any price point to where like you do just hang on to them? Like, let's say teams are only offering like maybe like a 6th and like a 7th round pick. Like at that point, do you just hang on to him, or are you really just intent on getting the rebuild going and trimming fat off the salary cap wherever you can?
Are you asking what I would do personally or what I think they would do?
Give me both.
I personally would hang on to DeAndre Hopkins if I feel I can't get at least like proper market value. Like what Brandon Cooks went for, I want a little better than that. Otherwise, I hold on to him. If this is the way Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenford are going to run this team, I think they're just looking to get whatever they can. And if that means 2 6th round picks instead of a 5th and a 6th or a 6th and a 7th kind of thing, I don't know. I'm not saying I would. I just
no. I know, but like the prospect of letting one of the best receivers in the game go, regardless of age, regardless of cap hit, for 2 6th round picks, that just sounds absolutely brutal, man. That sounds brutal. But it is what it is.
Brady and his brother. With
yeah,
those 2 6th round picks,
dude, and it's business. At the end of the day, it's business, and I feel like teams. What's funny is that there was a reporter for NBC Sports Boston. I'm forgetting his name, but he was the guy who reported that the Patriots are kind of waiting out in the market on DeAndre Hopkins, and he called the Brandon Cooks trade eye-opening for the Cardinals. That maybe they're not going to get what they think they deserve for DeAndre Hopkins. And at this point, the Patriots are kind of just waiting around, waiting for things to kind of settle and cool down. Michael Lombardi went on the podcast and said that the market for DeAndre Hopkins is very soft, meaning there's little to no movement on it. So, dude, we might see a case where the Cardinals are kind of taking pennies on the dollar for what they should be getting for a top-tier receiver.
Agreed. It's just like you said, it's part of the business. It's not the way you think it should go, but it's the way that it's probably going to go. Like guys almost never go for their value. They either go for way more than they're worth or way less than they're worth. Like at the end of the day, I think the biggest eye opener for me this offseason was Jalen Ramsey getting traded for a 3rd round pick and a backup tight end. when Jalen Ramsey is in the prime of his career and is arguably the best defender on defense, regardless of position. You make that argument, and he goes for a third-round pick and a backup tight end, and he's 27, 28 years old. Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins is not getting you a second-round pick like you think he is.
Unfortunately, man, that's kind of just the way things go when transitioning from a trade to free agency. Do you have any closing thoughts on DeAndre before we move on? I mean, I feel like we've already established he's pretty much as good as gone. As far as the timeline for him being traded, I'm not really sure. It wouldn't surprise me and if the Cardinals waited until draft day to make a move, but
Raven.
All right. moving on to free agency. Richie, before free agency started, you and I went back and forth a little bit on what priority either Byron Murphy or Zach Allen should have for the Cardinals. Nice little discussion, but I think we both walked away saying as long as you can get one of those guys back, you're probably in good shape. I mean, they're both 25 years old, both are very capable of being part of the rebuild here in Arizona. As it turns out, none of them came back. Whoops. Both Byron Murphy and Zach Allen dipped for greener pastures. Zach Allen, a 3-year, $47.75 million deal. Byron Murphy, a 2-year, $17.5 million deal. A lot of fans were upset. A lot of Cardinals fans were very upset. You weren't able to grab one of the two. I get it. We'll start with Zach Allen first before we move into Byron. That's a lot of money to give Zach Allen. I would be curious to see what Arizona offered him. But, I mean, he goes to Denver now. Sean Payton's the new head coach. He's playing under former defensive coordinator Vance Joseph, a guy who knows him pretty well. The paycheck seems to be pretty nice on Allen's standpoint. I feel like that's an offer the Cardinals weren't going to match, I guess.
I think so, Donnie, because this is a good player. This is not a what's that end up being? Almost $16 million a year,
somewhere around there.
Yeah, just about $16 million a year. This is not a $16 million a year player. Zach Allen, very good, very quality, has gotten better with each year that he's been in the league. Obviously, he had a very fine season last year with 5.5 sacks and was one of the more consistent defenders for the Cardinals. That was one of the reasons why we valued him, is because of his importance to the Cardinals. If he had gotten this deal with the Cardinals, it would have made sense because the Cardinals would be overspending a little bit to keep guys in-house that they've developed. But him getting this deal on the open market took me off guard a little bit. And This isn't Zach Allen slander at all. I really like Zach Allen. I'm upset that he left. But it is a lot of money. And for a team that has, again, new faces that didn't draft Zach Allen and have not worked with Zach Allen, they have no ties and loyalties to him. So to lose him for them they're not going to lose much sleep over it. Donnie calls spade a spade. They're just not. But for us, it is very difficult to look at how bad the Cardinals defense was last year and now lose one of the better players that was on that defensive side of the football, one of the more consistent guys, and say, hey, he's gone. Sorry. You don't get him anymore. JJ Watt retired. Byron Murphy's gone too. The whole defensive line is in flux. Like it's a tough blow to have to lose Zach Allen after you already were a bad defense. But again, bigger picture, Donnie, similar to what the DeAndre Hopkins thing, bigger picture is this team is rebuilding. They are blowing this thing up, and they are going to be retooling and reloading this roster with younger, cheaper guys. And Zach Allen, while very good, is not the caliber player where you couldn't lose him no matter what. He was a guy that you could take that calculated risk and lose out on. And normally you'd get a good compensatory pick, but the Cardinals have been active in signing some scraps in free agency. So congratulations, I suppose.
Yeah, I think things might be a little bit different if, let's say, instead of 4-13, they were around like 7-10, somewhere around like 500, to where if they were just a couple more pieces away, they could probably put together a run next year. And I think you're absolutely right when you talk about just going through a rebuild. And yeah, it would have been great for Zach Allen to stay, especially with losing JJ Watt. And you're looking at a defensive line before any outside people came of Lecky Fotu, Rashard Lawrence, Jonathan Ledbetter, which was brought back today too. Not exactly a defensive line to write home about, right? getting Zach Allen would have at least retained some of that continuity, some good continuity up front. But dude, just the price point, man, I'm so glad he got his money because he deserves it. He's such a solid guy. But for a guy who had 5.5 sacks last year, going into a year without JJ Watt next to him, I understand the hesitation from the new Cardinals front office and the new coaching staff to want to hand him that bag. And hopefully he continues to improve. Hopefully he outperformed his contract and he's just an absolute beast in Denver. But I get why the Cardinals were hesitant to pay him. I want to get your opinion on Byron Murphy because on paper, 2 years, $17.5 million, it looked doable from that standpoint. But whenever you really get into the details of the deal, it was basically like a 1 year, $11 million deal with a bunch of incentives laced in there too. A very cautious contract put together by the Vikings to ensure that Byron Murphy had the back injury heal and that he played for a full season before handing him a bunch of money. That deal seems more like Byron just wanted to leave as opposed to just absolutely getting a bag somewhere.
I think this is a more interesting situation because when Murphy was on the field last year, he was one of the best kept secrets in the NFL. He was going toe for toe against toe to toe, goodness gracious, against guys like AJ Brown and Cooper Kupp, and was doing a really good job truly taking that step into his contract year. And then he had the injury that derailed everything, and he has to basically take a prove-it deal. But I'm curious, like you said, is this his decision to just leave Arizona and go to Minnesota? Because this does feel like a deal that a front office for the Cardinals could have easily afforded and extended out. Like, this isn't some backbreaking contract like the Zach Allen deal. This is a much more reasonable deal. My thing is, similar to the Zach Allen thing, is this is a team that's looking to rebuild and they want to get younger and cheaper. And it's hard to do that when you're constantly paying guys. Like, look at some of the best teams in the league, like the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers are the two teams that come to mind off the top of my head, where they're constantly losing players to free agency because they don't pay them. They draft their replacements, develop them, and just continue to do that over and over again. I'm sure the Cardinals would like to get to that point where they can allow these players to walk in free agency. The frustrating thing is they just haven't found a way to develop the guys behind them, which is where I think fans get the most disgruntled and frustrated. Is it's like, well, we just lost Byron Murphy and we don't got anyone behind him. It'd be a different story. But I think this is the process that you need to eventually start taking, is you can't pay everyone. And bad news, Cardinal fans, you already are paying Kyler Murray. So unfortunately, you are already in a situation where you have to make tough decisions, and they did not make the most of his rookie deal. And now they have to, pay the piper. They have to understand that they're going to be losing. This is just the beginning. There's going to be a lot of guys that they lose because of the Kyler Murray contract. So they really got to hope that they can start knocking it out in the draft and continue doing what teams like the Steelers and the Ravens do, where they draft and develop guys and allow those other guys to walk. I think that's the biggest thing, is they're disgruntled and they should be, because the team has not had the ability to have that luxury before. But this is hopefully a step in the right direction. You can't pay everyone, Donnie. I can't say that enough times. You can't pay everyone. But
yeah, the thing I like about the two organizations you brought up, the Ravens, the Steelers, they'll retain their elite talent.
Exactly.
They'll pay their top end talent to make sure they stay.
Unless it's Lamar.
But when you look at just how teams are built through the draft, those teams are more successful than teams who just try to add a bunch of free agents through spending money. And the Cardinals were never going to do that anyway, regardless of like the coaching staff change. But man, like the teams don't do that a lot, and Cardinals fans are understandably frustrated because they're just not really doing anything. They lost their top two free agents. We'll get into a couple of guys that they signed here in just a moment, but no splashes, no waves. But when you look at where the Cardinals are at, I just feel like they were never going to do that. Like they were never going to seriously sit there and say, okay, we got to pay this guy. We got to pay that guy. Moving the convo back to Byron Murphy, though, I feel like if you would have taken that contract and just slapped the Arizona Cardinal logo in front of it, now we're talking. Now fans are like, okay, sick. We got a very, very good young corner for a very team-friendly deal. They're able to get out of it after 1 year if Byron is hurt again or he doesn't perform up to par, but it still keeps him around for a couple more years. And I feel like good corner talent is so hard to find.
Yep.
In the NFL. Good young corner talent is extremely hard to find. Byron Murphy proved to be very versatile. He proved that he can cover in the slot. He proved that he can cover on the boundary. Like you said, he not locked up. He limited some of the best receivers in the football last year. Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, AJ Brown, like you said. I mean, the list goes on.
Adams got the clamps.
Adams he caught a touchdown on the first drive of that game and didn't do
and that was
anything else.
2 catches the whole game.
That touchdown he caught was like a goal line screen.
Yep.
Too. Yep. Just
vintage
like he did in Green Bay.
Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball the entire time. But do you look at all of the factors that go into the Cardinals free agency, and I'll just go ahead and I'll pull up the next list right now. Before we get into these guys, because I do like a couple of these signings, how much do you think that report card played a factor into the lack of boom the Cardinals have had this offseason? I think it's played a bigger factor than some people think.
It's something. I look at these guys and I see a bunch of lotto tickets that you bought, and I am not really a fan of any of these. I do like Kazir White. You already have 2 freaking first-round picks that you're paying. You did not need another off-ball linebacker. I'm sorry. I get it because he played with Jonathan Gannon. But
they might go to a 4-3, and I think that's the allure with that. But if you're going to a 4-3, then you're basically just indicating that Isaiah Simmons is going to be a 4-3 outside linebacker. And I'm just not sure Isaiah Simmons is a 4-3 outside linebacker, you know?
I'm not sure Isaiah Simmons is a linebacker.
Some would argue that's right.
I just look at this, Donnie, and it's like, were any of these guys like not going to be available after June 1st when you wouldn't have killed yourself with compensatory picks? Like,
I think
Kazir White probably would have been gone.
Yeah.
I'm not killing myself for losing Kazir White. LJ Collier, the dude that's barely in the NFL at this point. He is living off the reputation of he was a first-round pick, and most people don't even realize he was a first-round pick because he was so bad. Forholt, I don't know anything about him. Zach Pascal has been passed around the league. Like, these aren't guys that I think were worth it to sign. But granted, I also don't know if any of these guys were released. And if they were, then obviously that doesn't count against compensatory picks. My bottom line is I look at these guys and it's like, I don't feel like you needed to sign any of them.
Yeah, so White's more of that like off-ball linebacker. It feels like he's going to play a lot next year. What the Cardinals are going to do. I don't want to
seem like I'm
no.
Kazir White.
Sure.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not sure exactly what the Cardinals plan on doing defensively. I guess we'll find out in like off-season team activities. But I mean, what they plan on doing is still a very, very big question mark. LJ Collier, it's a name. Zach Pascal, I feel like Pascal had his moments with both the Eagles and the Colts. Never really put up a crazy amount of like box score numbers, but if you look at the offense he's playing in, he's never really asked to do that. Dude, I practiced Forholt's name this like entire lead up to the podcast. Now I'm just blanking on exactly how you say it. But he started, I think, 6 games last year. And then another free agent signing I think the Cardinals had, just so I don't butcher his name, let me look it up really quick. The tackle they just signed from the Tennessee Titans.
Oh,
Dennis Daly.
I
almost said Dennis Allen. Dennis Daly.
I was going to say Dennis Kelly. So
started all 16 games for the Titans last year. I think Johnny Gambadoro poured out that he led the league in like sacks allowed, I think,
really?
And then also was supposed to whistle, for like a bunch of penalties. But like these are all 1 to 2 year, very cheap signings. And if you look at some of the guys they brought back, Matt Prater, Kelvin Beachum, Will Hernandez, dude, a lot of those guys are on like very like cheapish, like not like market value deals. It feels like they're kind of like bargain shopping right now.
I think that's what you need to do when you're in the Cardinals position. So for the people who haven't checked it out yet, I did put out an article today talking about quarterbacks that the Cardinals should look at. And my distinction that I put in there with these guys is that you sign them if you're intent on trying to compete. And when I say trying to compete, I'm not saying win a Super Bowl. This team is not winning a Super Bowl next year. If they do, I will shave my head and my beard, all of it, on live camera. If the Cardinals win a Super Bowl next year, whole thing gone. Clip it. 100%. With that being said, like maybe you have this new front office and team that is like, we're not content on tanking. We would rather fight for a tough 5 to 7, maybe 8 wins kind of thing. If you are intent on doing that, then you look at the quarterbacks that I listed. But with how I'm tying that in is I think that this team, I don't know for sure if they are intent on tanking 2023 or if they do want to come out and say, you know what, you may think we're bad and we're just going to beat you up and we may lose this game 20-17, but we're going to put up a fight and we're going to win more games than you think we should. Like, I'd be curious after the draft when the win totals come out, what they give the Cardinals, because I might take the over just because I feel like this is a team that is going to want to fight more than they do roll over. And these signings tell me that. These signings tell me, like you said, it's the bargain bin. It's like, we're not going to spend the top money on Javon Hargrave, which they should have done, but neither here nor there. We're not going to spend the money on Isaac Sulamalo or any of the other guys who are on the market, big names that I can't think of. Like they're grabbing the misfit toys and they're putting together a team that's going to be chippy. And this isn't a Super Bowl team. If I had to pick between a Super Bowl team or a team picking number 1, it's obviously a team picking number 1. But I do think that this is a team that could potentially just be scrappy and scratch and claw their way to 5, 6, 7 wins next year. Like, I'm not willing to rule them out as the worst team in football just yet. But we'll also see with Kyler. There's so many things, Donnie, that we have yet to see that'll play into my decision.
I think 2023 is not going to be a record year. I don't think the Cardinals themselves are going to look at the win-loss column. I think next year is going to be establishing a culture, doing things the right way, kind of getting your philosophy in the building, getting your franchise quarterback fully healthy to play a 17-game schedule, getting some top talent in both 2023 and 2024 drafts, and then kind of roll from there. You also, dude, we're not even talking about Marquise Brown going into the last year of his contract. We're not talking about Isaiah Simmons' 5th-year option still hasn't been picked up yet. There's still a key decisions to be made for these guys. And I just think it's going to be a very slow process at first. And I want to jump right into this because you were going back and forth on whether or not you don't know if the Cardinals are going to be tanking. You don't know if they're going to try to be a scrappy team. With how they've operated so far, Richie, and this is the quarterback depth right here, Kyler Murray, Colt McCoy, David Blau, who just re-signed with the team yesterday or early this morning. I forget which one.
Congrats, David.
David's a great guy. I'm so happy for him. Great guy. I'm happy he's able to stick around. Hopefully we get to see more magic tricks.
We stand David Blau on this podcast.
We do. Dude, I think they're letting 2023 be what it is. I think if they were really trying to compete, they would have gotten another quarterback by now. You have to figure Kyler Murray is projected to miss about half of the season. Nobody really knows one way or another. It kind of all just depends on how his rehab is going. But both Jonathan Gannon and Kyler Murray himself has been very proactive in saying that like they're not going to rush at ACL and meniscus tear back. They're just not going to do it, which I agree with. I think to try to rush him back into the season they're about to endure, not a smart thing, especially whenever you have such a long-term investment into him. But then you look at Colt McCoy, who I think is 37, 38.
Is that all?
Had a minor surgery this offseason. Already was kind of hitting that, okay, well, if you need him for a game, sure, but like he's not this like potential starter. And then David Blau, who I feel like played pretty good down the stretch, but once teams get film on him, once teams get film on him, they'll be able to kind of pick apart his things that he does well, things that he does well, all the good stuff. I think if they were really trying to compete, they would have gone out and they would have gotten
three quarterbacks I talked about.
A viable quarterback. Because what you talked about, spoiler, Joe Flacco, Teddy Bridgewater, and Josh Johnson, right?
Josh Johnson.
And then you purposely left out Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz because you knew they were going to be more expensive options. And that's kind of just not what the Cardinals are trying to do. I don't know, man. I feel like they're punting on 2023.
I think so too. Like I said, the reason I'm holding out is just because, like you talked about, like, are they going to come out and try and establish that culture in year one? Because the culture that I'm getting from Jonathan Gannon, we haven't seen him coach, so we don't know yet for sure as a head coach. But he gives off that vibe of we're going to play 60 minutes, maybe 70, depending on how long this game goes on. But we're going to play it tough. We're going to play it hard. You're going to hate us for the entirety of that game. We're not going to roll over. If they do come in with that mentality in year one, I don't think this is a team that will be picking with the first overall pick. I just don't, because I don't think that teams with that mentality are that bad. I think the teams that you see picking number one overall more often than not are defeated teams. And I just don't think that that's Jonathan Gannon's mentality. If it is, then, it is what it is. This is not a 1 year fix for the Cardinals. This is going to be multiple years. I'm just curious, how quickly are you looking to establish that culture? Are you looking for a tank for 2024 to where you could look at some of the top guys like Jared Verse from Florida State or Dallas Turner from Alabama or any of the other guys that are going to be in next year's class? There's tons of them. Kool-Aid McKinstry, guys like that. Or are you looking to show off who you are, flex that, we're only going to be better after a tough year kind of thing? I don't know. But again, we're still so early in this offseason. We haven't even hit the draft yet. We don't have schedules for next year. We haven't looked at OTAs. We haven't finished training camp. There's still so much left to figure out for what to expect for the 2023 season. And that's the reason why I put out that article today on whether or not they should go after the three quarterbacks I mentioned, because if you do want to be competitive, those are the three guys I'm looking at personally. These three guys aren't doing it for me.
I think the top guy, when healthy, is doing it for me.
Kyler would, but he's got a bum knee.
Yeah,
that's the only reason why. Otherwise, I feel confident.
I get it. Sure. To that point, and to wrap this up, I think I'm very much of the belief that losing breeds losing, and so I don't know exactly what you're looking at too. Losing breeds losing, and when you have just a continuous cycle of these 4-13 seasons, it just nobody benefits from it. Like there's no point in tanking. And I tried to explain to somebody how hard it is for NFL teams to tank. It's just through the window. You have to convince professionals that are competing for their jobs on a weekly basis to purposely do bad, to potentially go get a franchise altering player. Excuse me. And that's just so hard to do. Shout out to Miami because they tried to do it, but Brian Flores had other ideas. But I just don't think Jonathan Gannon is going to purposely throw in the towel in the season. Exactly. And football is not played on paper. And dude, any given Sunday, we have learned that so many times. Is any given Sunday going to repeat itself 17 times through a season? Probably not. Are the Cardinals going to be a playoff team next year? Probably not. But it really, really feels like Gannon, at minimum, is going to coach the hell out of those guys and just make sure everybody knows the expectations whenever they walk into the door at the Cardinals facility. Go ahead, share it. I know you want to. Go ahead.
I want to finish our thoughts here real quick before I toot the horn. But for earlier when we were talking about, like, I brought up the win-loss total in Vegas and that I would take the over, you kind of had a look of like, ooh, interesting. And the reason you just explained, Donnie, is why I would take the over, is because Jonathan Gannon does not give off the vibe of a guy who's going to quit in year one and hope to rebound in year two. I think
right, Jonathan but Gannon's like you still have to look at the talent on the team.
Yes, no, 100%, 100% agree. We are in the exact same boat. I'm just saying that with that mentality, you can coach guys up, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Cardinals won 7 games this year, or if they won 2. I truly do think this is,
to your point. Look at Carolina. Look at Carolina after Steve Wilkes took over last year.
Right, dude. It is 100%. Coaching is so much more important than people realize. And speaking of coaching being important, Bobby Hurley, baby, 2-year extension for Arizona State. Literally, Donnie, yesterday's episode, or today's episode, came out on Monday. What's today?
Whenever people hear this, it'll be Wednesday.
There you go. So yesterday's episode of Locked On Sun Devils, I said, I don't know if Hurley's back or not. Well, he's back, 2-year extension. So if you're a Sun Devil fan and you're looking for someone to tell you about it, check out Locked On Sun Devils.
Exactly. All right. Yeah, I think that perfectly puts a bow on the conversation. The moves the Cardinals are making really seem to be for setting the tone. Whether or not it's going to result in wins, we'll kind of see. But fans, I know you're frustrated. I know it sucks to kind of be on the sidelines watching everybody else have fun in free agency. But I think great teams are built for the draft, and I think the Cardinals, Monty Alsoport, Jonathan Gannon know that as well. I think they're on the same page whenever it comes to that. And I think eventually all the dominoes will fall into place. But until next time, thank you so much for joining into another edition of the All Cardinals podcast. Go to comment, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Follow me at Twitter at Donnie Druin. Follow Richie on Twitter at RichieBrads36. And we will catch you guys next time.